Okay, just to start, a little bit about me. Uh, thanks for the laughs. So I'm a second year PhD student at University of British Columbia, and I was going to put that I've attended a lot of conferences. I don't know, compared to some people, maybe not, but I've done it throughout my late undergrad and early grad. So I hope this perspective is kind of helpful. And I actually, like you, attended PLMW back in 2017, which I don't like saying nowadays. But really, it's like such an honor to be here talking to you now. It's pretty crazy. Don't know how my life got here. So, yeah. Okay. So, there's going to be a lot of advice in this talk. And I want to make something incredibly clear is that really advice doesn't work for everyone. These are just my experiences and things that I've found that work for me. But really, the best advice is to take no one's advice. But then you get into a weird cyclical issue about do you take that advice? But really, you should just think for yourself, right? And see, maybe some things you'll take, you cherry pick and see what works for you. All right, so let's finally talk about conferences. So, for some of you, this might be your first conference or second conference, and you might be thinking conferences consist of a bunch of research talks, a full schedule of these talks, a bunch of other events, and a lot of strangers. But through this talk, I really hope that it can change your perspective to one of the following, where instead of a lot of strangers, you have a lot of potential friends that you can make at conferences. Instead of following a full schedule, make your own personal schedule. And it turns out there's still a lot of research talks. So you can't really get around that. So the structure of my talk is I'm going to be talking about these three components individually and giving my random assorted advice about that. Um, but ultimately, I maintain this perspective because going to a conference, reading papers, reviewing papers, everything to do with the conference itself is ultimately engaging with the community, right? You're ultimately at one point or another, you're talking to an individual person, right? And so I always just think about people first when it comes to conferences. So speaking of people, let's talk about the first point, lots of strangers, or really just meeting lots of strangers. So I want to motivate this a little bit because we know meeting new people can be kind of stressful. So why even bother meeting a bunch of people at a conference? Well, for the short term, it's really, it'll make your conference experience a lot more enjoyable. You'll have people to talk to during the breaks, discuss talks with, discuss memes with, discuss whatever you want with, really. Have dinner with together, etc., etc. So for the short term, it's pretty worth it. You have a fun week. But I'm really more interested in sort of the long-term benefits of meeting people at conferences. So in particular, I've listed out three of these. There's probably a ton more, but I find that these three categories kind of cover a lot of them. So in particular, by meeting people, you help build up a support system for whatever you end up doing in your life, right? Doesn't matter what that might be. In particular, meeting people, you'll be exposed to a lot more new opportunities, and you could open up potential collaborations with new people that you meet. So I'll talk about each of these individually. So building a support system. So just emphasizing, no one gets through life alone, even though some people try and make it seem that way. Um, you know, we all need the support of someone at some point, no matter what we're doing in our life. And put especially helpful in grad school here, but really should have put necessary, I think, based on how my life is going in grad school. Um, if you're interested in grad school and you don't find yourself with a support system, I mean, I think a lot of people's, um, reason for dropping out of grad school differs a lot. But I think some of the reasons might be trace back to this issue of not having a support system, right? It's just so vitally important, a lot more important than I can really say. Just like being here today and seeing a bunch of people that I know and being able to hug them again is just like really incredible. So very happy to be here. So for me, building up the support system, PLMW was really the start. I still have contacts that I made back in 2017. Shout out to Jumi. I don't think he's here though. Yeah, and then it kind of built up. Every conference I went to, I would meet more people. And then now coming to conferences, it feels like a big friendship reunion, which is really nice. And this picture I have here is a little traumatic, just because it was the last in-person conference I went to in January of 2020. So right on the edge there. But this is all of us together skipping some talks, which I'll talk about at some point. Right. So I mentioned more opportunities by meeting people. Really, you can just learn about completely new careers and new software and new research that people work on that you wouldn't have known otherwise if you didn't talk to people, right? But it's all not about work and what you do with your life. You can also find out cool things that people do in their free time, which I especially like learning because I want to pretend to be a cool person. So finding out other people's cool hobbies, I can be like, I'm gonna take that so I can be cool like you. So as an example, um, when I was an undergrad, I had no idea what professors did. I thought they would just show up and teach classes, maybe like this. I don't know what is going on here, but yeah. So to me, my perspective was, well, professors just show up and lecture to me about stuff that I should know. But coming to PLMW, I got to see another side of what some professors do, which is research. I got to see that firsthand, so that was really cool. And then in terms of hobbies, turns out the functional programming community is weirdly into t-shirts. So for context, you might have already seen it. Jane Street is a company that funds a lot of our conferences. Thank you, Jane Street. And they make really cool t-shirts, but they're not exclusively a t-shirt company. Got to make that clear too. So you're going to see a lot of people wearing these shirts throughout the conference. Actually, Kartik, who gave me these pictures, thank you, Kartik, is actually wearing one of these shirts right now. So I'll get to match. Okay, and then finally, potential collaborations. Really, when you're new to a field, this is so vitally important for staying in a field, right? How else are you going to learn about how to do things unless you have a collaboration with someone who's teaching you, right? And this also ties back to the point of building up your support network through these potential collaborations that you have. So for example, this is my supervisor, William J. Bowman. I got him a cat costume for Halloween. So this is us at Halloween and him wearing a cat costume. And yeah, I actually met him at ICFP in 2018, so a year after PLMW. And I had no plans to apply to UBC, which is my current institution, until I met William at a conference. And he said, hey, you should come work for me. I was like, okay, I guess I'll just add it to the list, grad schools that I'm applying to. And, it all came down to, who I wanted to work with the most. And it turned out it was William. So it's really nice. All right, so I've talked a lot about the benefits of meeting people. Let's talk about actually how to meet people at conferences. So it'd be really great if we could start with peers, right? It's always easier because you're at the same level, you have things to talk about, relate about. This conference should really do a thing where they get people together the same level-ish, attending conferences for the first time. That would be a great idea, wouldn't it? Oh, wait, we're all here at PLMW. So, of course, I'm not going to talk about meeting people without making you meet people. So it's a little bit before lunch. We're feeling a little bit sleepy. So I want to encourage people to get up. I see people have made groups kind of already. So I'm changing this up a bit. I'm going to try and split you up. So for this, the question is very simple. Why are you at PLMW? What inspired you to apply and travel all this way? Or maybe not travel too far. But try and find someone you don't know. So I see some people in rows with like groups. Maybe it's just coincidence that you're sitting together. Maybe it's not. But let's try and walk around and switch it up. I'm also going to be walking around to meet people. So let's take 5 minutes to do that. Make your way back to your seats if you can, or new seats with new friends. Makes me really happy to see everyone's so eager to talk. So glad I did this. Also, I'm very happy to talk to all of you. although I only talked for a few minutes, but okay. So let's talk about expanding beyond PLMW. So I think making connections within PLMW is very good and important. And if you find that you come away with a bunch of new friends from PLMW, that's awesome. But it also turns out there's a lot of people, helping out in PLMW right now who know a lot of people in industry and academia. So my point is all of these people at PLMW are here to help you, and so don't forget about them after today, right? They're going to be around for the rest of the conference. Make sure to keep in contact with them and find connections through them as well. So, speaking of connections, some of you might know people at ICFP already, might be lucky enough. Maybe you're at the same institution or you've met previously, et cetera, et cetera. And so I just encourage you to keep the chain of introductions going. So you just met someone new, try and introduce two people that you know already at PLMW or outside of PLMW. So this week, I challenge you to introduce two people. And I think this is a really simple and easy way to make our community feel a lot more welcoming and inclusive. And I'll be talking about other ways to do that as well, in particular for conversation circles. So I'm sure you've already noticed that, but during a lot of the breaks, a lot of people kind of split up into circles. And I know I gave caveats about advice, but I do hope you take this advice about conversation circles. I think one of the simplest things is just always make room for people to join your circle. It's really just a simple act of just kind of like scooting a little bit, when somebody looks like they're interested in your conversation. And again, I think this is really important for making the community feel a lot more inclusive. When you have new people join, make sure to pause and give them a chance to introduce themselves. I can understand getting deep into conversations, so that can be difficult. But if you can find a pause in the conversation to do this, definitely recommend it. Be like, hey, I don't know you. Can you introduce yourself? Along that line, if you find yourself in one of these circles where you don't know anybody, take the chance to introduce yourself. If you find that, you're kind of just listening to the conversation for most of the time, this is totally fine as well. I've definitely just participated in some conversations where I'm just listening to a bunch of smart people talk. But I make sure to introduce myself at least, right? So kind of like a fly on the wall, but I have a name now. Alrighty, so speaking of conversations, let's talk about small talk that happens at conferences. So a lot of the questions you're going to see at the conference when talking to new people especially is, what's your research? What did you think of the talk or the keynote? What talk are you excited about in the next session or overall in the conference? And, are you giving a talk? All these very boring questions. I'm totally kidding, by the way. It's good to know about people's research. That's why you're here. But, for the sake of the joke, I'm going to give my own small talk questions. So in particular, do you have a pet and can I see pictures of them? I'm a huge fan of cats. So if you have cat pictures, feel free to stop me anytime and show me your cat. I'm really excited to ask this question. So if you were a goose, how would you cause chaos in a local park? Really some people in mind I have for this question. This one is a little bit chaotic. You could start some fights, so might not be appropriate in a professional setting. So be careful with this one. It's just what's your favorite ice cream flavor? Could start some fiery debates. And then what's something you wish you could have touched on in your talk? This is a little bit more serious. I think it's a great question. Turns out the ICFP talks are 15 minutes long, which I discovered because I have an ICFP talk. And 15 minutes is like 0 time to talk about anything. So I'm pretty sure a lot of the speakers are going to just be ready to answer this question when you have it for them. All right, just to finish up the talking about strangers, they're a little bit like spiders. They're more scared of you than you're scared of them. I think the stereotype of computer science communities is that we're all kind of introverted. I don't know if this stereotype really stands in the functional programming community, but regardless, I think one of the best things I realized early on is that people are really happy when you start the conversation because once you get into the flow of it, it's very easy. But just having that initial spark is a little bit hard. So if you find yourself inspired to do it, I definitely recommend it. In particular, I mean, we're all here to meet people, so this is like the best time to start random conversations. Unlike being on the street, just like accosting someone and being like, "Have you heard the good word of functional programming languages?" Like that wouldn't go well. So, and then finally, don't forget to keep in contact with people. Really important. I keep in contact with a lot of people through Twitter, which is, it's kind of a cesspool, so not the recommended strategy. But I include my email, and I also have various messaging apps. Okay, so that's enough about strangers. Let's talk about scheduling your time while you're here at the conference. I'm going to start with like a main point of advice, and then we're going to go over maybe an example like daily schedule you could follow or adjust to your own liking. So the main point of advice is, okay, I'm not sure what I'm trying to say here. Oh, okay. It's don't attend every talk. It does sound a little bit counterintuitive because you are here to learn about a lot of different research areas. So it seems useful to attend every talk. But the reason I give this advice is that it's really easy to burn out very quickly early on in the conference. And so if you want to make sure that you can attend all the days of the conference, I recommend skipping some sessions to take a break, let your mind and body rest, touch more on that, so that you can actually learn more in the process. So in particular, the conference consists of a bunch of sessions, right? The conference organizers put in a lot of time to put related talks together so that it makes it easier for us to schedule our time. So really, you got to learn how to use these to your advantage, and make sure you schedule your time around sessions that you're interested in. But you might be thinking, I have no idea which sessions I'm interested in. There's a bunch of terms in here that I don't understand. You know what? I just recommend choosing randomly, but that's just me. Good conversation topic. Ask people what session they're attending. That's actually what I did, I think, early on at conferences. So I really didn't know what sessions to attend, so I would just ask people and just follow them into the room and sit next to them. But you could also, research some of the terms if you wanted, and then get even more confused and be like, maybe this session will illuminate some of these terms I've found. And this might not apply too much for ICFP because I think we have one track, but I think there's multiple workshops happening in parallel. So at bigger conferences, there's sessions of the main conference happening in parallel. And just to emphasize this point, it's fine to be interested in a talk in the first session and then in like one session and then switch to the other one for the rest of the talks. Just make sure you do it respectfully because it turns out a lot of people talk in the hallway. So when you open the door, it just like blasts in sound when you're switching between sessions. So just keep that in mind. Okay, I know I said don't attend all the talks, but I do really recommend attending all the keynotes. They're usually done by really, really smart people. It's a longer period of time for them to give their talks, so they're a lot more accessible, and they kind of tie in a lot of cool themes. And overall, there's some really great keynotes, so I definitely recommend seeing all of them. Okay, so given a little bit of advice, let's talk about an example schedule. So I already said attend the keynotes. So there's usually a keynote in the mornings. There's the coffee break, of course. So you might find yourself refreshed with coffee and able to attend the morning session. And then luckily there's lunch afterwards. But you find that after lunch, this is the perfect time to nap or rest. So definitely recommend that. And then maybe after your rest time, you find that you have the energy to attend the second afternoon session, and then whatever happens after the last session. So this is just an example schedule that one might want to follow. In particular, I explicitly programmed nap/rest time into the schedule. Excuse me. So I'm not really a nap person. I can't really nap during the day. I guess I should have started by saying the reason why I'm giving this talk late is because my flight was late. So I'm like running on like zero sleep over the past 24 plus hours. So bear with me here. But anyway, so rest is really important. So for me, I'm adjusting to a new sleeping schedule. Some of you might also be. So in the physical sense, it's really important to take time to rest. But also, it turns out your brain is working really hard during the conference. you're learning a ton of new things or just really hearing about a ton of new things. And that takes more of a toll than you might think. So even if you can just find the time, maybe not to just nap explicitly, even just finding like a corner to be quiet and just like zone out, which is something I do, is really important. Because if you don't do it, you might end up like this, which is literally me right now. So, yeah, again, just emphasizing lighter daily schedule, more days of the conference attended. That's what I recommend. So for me personally, I try and attend all the days of the conference. I get pretty tired, but I find that I kind of think of it like, all right, I'm sprinting. It's like a week. I can like do it. I can go every day. But of course, I do skip sessions, in particular to go eat tasty snacks. That's my favorite thing. If you have other fun things planned in mind, keep me in mind for those. Okay, so I talked about meeting strangers, scheduling your time. Let's talk about the meat of the conference, research talks. And really, the main point of advice is here is that talks are really hard to understand, and you're going to find that you're like this most of the time. I'm like this most of the time. Everyone else is too, although it might not seem that way. But trust me, they are. Especially with 15-minute talks. Sorry, just saying that again. Uh, but I've been doing research for a couple years now, I guess, and I still so it never really changes. Is my point. So you might be wondering why is this the case, and there's a few issues here. Is that turns out these people are studying a really highly specific area for years, and then they have 15 minutes to tell you about it. So of course you're not going to understand because you don't have all the years of context, right? In particular, a lot of the time it's a teaser for the paper because there's a lot more explanation in the paper, and they don't have time to go into all of that. So um, they're usually structured in this way. In particular, since there's not a lot of time, they're going to assume a lot of knowledge background. I do this in my own talk, which I kind of hate, but it is the nature of short talks about a very specific subject. And finally, a lot of them can be aimed at experts. So we're all here to kind of expand science, and the most efficient way to do this is to find the person that's also working in the area and say, "Hey, here's this new thing I did. What do you think?" So a lot of talks can be structured in this way. So my point is research talks are not at all like college lectures or high school lectures or whatever, school lectures, where we're really used to the structure of lectures being, slow, building up, things you already know, and you're really used to just like following along. You're going to be just sitting there thinking, where's the explanation for any of this stuff you're telling me? Right? Yeah, so it's okay to be like this. And actually, I think recognizing that you'll be like this is helpful. In particular, I actually was thinking of alternative titles for this part of the talk. But yeah, I still struggle with this a lot. So this talk is a little bit for me as well for you. People say, do as I say, not as I do, which is unfortunate. But yeah, I'm trying to motivate myself here too for the rest of the conference. So like I said, I think recognizing that you won't understand a lot of the talk is actually key to getting something out of the talk. Now I'm choosing my words carefully here. I'm saying getting something out of the talk, not necessarily understanding the talk. Being comfortable with what's unknown can kind of help you relax your brain a little bit and kind of absorb things a little bit better. So in particular, I talked about getting things out of a talk. So, some things you might get out of a talk is how a research talk's structured. They often start with motivation and then the problem and then solution, right? Maybe in particular, someone's talk, they gave the motivation really well, and so you kind of have an idea of a motivation for a certain research area. Or maybe they gave the components of a solution really well. Those are all great things to get out of a talk, by the way. So incredible if you get that. I don't usually get that. So the reality is, something you might get out of a talk is research talks are just confusing, right? You're gonna find there's lots of terms to Google later. That's great too. There's a lot of funny symbols. I mean, come on. These particular funny symbols are actually from my lab mate Joey's paper. He's giving his presentation tomorrow. Monday's tomorrow, right? Sorry, I'm like really lost right now. Yeah. So actually, Joey in particular, I think, is really good at giving accessible talks. So I recommend going to Joey's talk. Yeah, little pitch for Joey. Okay. So relaxing your brain can help in other ways, in particular for meeting smart people. This ties back to our first point of meeting new people. We're all at different stages. So if you relax your brain from the anxiety of you're like, oh my God, this person's like way smarter than me. Why am I talking to them? Why are they talking to me? You know, I think a lot of people here are extremely nice and more than happy to explain their talk and answer any questions that you might have about their talk. We're all here to help you. So keep that in mind. And this, again, a little bit for me too. So this is a little bit about, so I talked about relaxing your brain, but really what's going to be happening a lot during the conference is you're going to be exposed to a lot of new information, really just drowning your brain. And so you might find that actually this is a helpful method for learning things. So in particular, I took a course in college, a machine learning course actually, speaking of machine learning, where basically the professor took the approach of research talks to like every lecture. She would just like give us a barrage of things all, and like I had no idea how any connected, no background. It was crazy. And 6 weeks into the course, I was like, I got to drop this course because I have no idea what's going on. And then she asked me a couple of questions. I was like, well, yeah, I know what that is. She's like, that's just my method. I just throw a bunch of things at you repeatedly until we see what sticks. So you might find that this method actually you do learn something. In particular, we have pattern-seeking brains. So you might find that some of the things you get exposed to a lot. I actually just stole a bunch of these symbols from random papers. So if any of the authors are in here, I'm sorry. But anyway, right. I mean, I've done a lot of like teaching, teaching assisting really. And so I found that every year that I would teach this or help assist the same course, right, I learned new things every time because it just hadn't like sunk in yet, really. And so, by attending a lot of conferences and seeing all these patterns emerge, you might actually find that the drowning your brain method is quite helpful. Alrighty, so that's all I have for attending research talks. So I started this talk by talking about how I approach conferences, which is, thinking about a lot of potential friends, having a personal schedule, and of course, research talks. So, don't forget to grow your support network. You've already started. That's amazing. Make sure to make us feel like a more welcoming community by introducing yourselves and others. Personal schedule. My main point of advice is don't attend every talk and include lots of risks for that brain working hard. And finally, for research talks, again, a little bit for me, recognize that you're still learning and there's still a lot to get out of talks, even if you don't understand everything completely. I looked up Finn, and this is what came up. So that's the end of my talk. And that's my email. Thank you.